Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm creating a Happy Meal card using Hello Bluebird, Singing in the Rain and the Diamond Daze background stamp. Now, these stamps have been lying here for a while now, and as I said before, I'm trying to catch up, always happy when I'm doing a voiceover of one of these amazing stamps that still needed some attention. Normally I start with the coloring, but today I'm starting with my background stamp. Why? Well, it's a really intricate one and I want to do some heat embossing. Now I am definitely not experienced with heat embossing, so that's why I started with this. Also, the stamp is really sticky. I never used it before, but just as you saw, my paper kept lifting up and I need to re-stamp this a few times, I'm sure of that. So I decided to add some temporary adhesive on the back of my panel to keep it in place, and now I'm going to really work this panel. I decided to even turn off the front of my embossing powder tool, and this way I had way too much anti-static powder on top of this panel, but I worked with it, and I think I prepped this panel quite well. Now I'm stamping out this stamp. As I said, I'm going to do some heat embossing, so I'm using the Versamark clear embossing ink, and I'm going to stamp this image quite a few times. Now, to help me put some pressure, I just use the paper towel. It helps me to be able to go over my misty without having my fingers stick to the glass, the plastic. You know what I mean. So I did that a few times. I turned my head around to see with the light if there was the Versamark everywhere. And then I stamped it another time. Just to be sure, you never know. So after I did that, I could add my embossing powder. Now today I'm using the clear superfine detail embossing powder from Ranger. You can also use white, or if you prefer another color, then of course the other color can go as well. But when I'm doing some emboss resist on a white panel, I tend to use clear embossing powders. So this is a super fine detail, which is really handy for this intricate background stamp. I heat set, I let my heat gun first heat up, and then I heat set the completed panel, turned it towards the light a bit to see whether everything was melted, and I fixed those areas where I apparently skipped the heat embossing until everything was smooth, melted, shiny, and all those things that you want. So once I was sure about the heat embossing, I could continue with my background, because I'm not going to leave it like this. I'm going to do some emboss resists using my distress inks. Only two. I'm using the Peacock feathers and cracked pistachio. Now for my images later on, I wanted to have some grounding, so I didn't want this distress ink to go all towards the bottom. Also, this panel is slightly smaller than an A2, but it's larger because I didn't know yet how much of a grounding I wanted to have, so I kept all the options open, and I will trim down this panel later on. Now, as I said, for this background, only two colors, the cracked pistachio and the Peacock feathers distress inks. I love them. I used these as well because I already knew what kind of colors I wanted to use on my critters. So therefore, I had this combination in the umbrella planned out, so that would help me if it returns in my background. It's something that I prefer doing, having my colors return somehow, or like, for example, later I will do the coat and the boots in the same color of Copic Markers. It's just something that I like doing. So if I can do the same with my images that I color in with my Copic markers and my background that I will ink blend, I will try to do that as well. I'm stamping out my sentiments, and then I can move on to my images. Now for my images, first time I stamped it out and colored it in, well, there were two images where I had some bleeding of my ink, which I don't always have, actually barely have, but I got it this time, so you can see it on the right panel. The face, there was some bleeding as well as one of the ducklings, so I just stamped it out again, and since the ducklings are colored the same way, I'm going to show you here how I colored everything, and then you have just one easy overview of the coloring. I'm starting with the hardest part of my images, and that's the hair. It's always difficult, I said it many times before, but it helps that there are already lines so that you can sort of let yourself be guided by that. And as you can see also, I'm working from darkest to lightest. Now the umbrella and the stick of the umbrella, I first kept attention to it and tried to not go over it, but then I realized that I was going to do the stick in a darker color, so I just went over it without bothering. Also about hair, I personally don't find that you need to fill up all the blanks. Like, there can definitely be just an area where there isn't a marker and then you have an extra highlight. From time to time that happens. From time to time when I do a second layer, it covers the wide area, so then I do no longer have that. But if I have, I'm not necessarily covering that using some markers. Now I went a bit outside lines, and since the face is going to be lighter than the hair color, I had to use my colorless blender to get that brown out of the ears. And then I'm just starting on my coloring of the rest of the image. Now I'm trying to keep my shadowing on the right side of the image, which is not necessarily needed, but if you have some sort of an idea where you want your shadows and you can keep it all over the images, well, I think it's lovely, but you don't necessarily need to do that. Just have fun with the coloring, with the shadowing, and as long as you like the end result, then that's what you need to do. That's just perfect. So I said it many times before, with this paper I prefer at least 2 layers. Now what I notice is when I'm doing skin tones, which personally I find really difficult, I often need more than 2 layers just to get it right. And that, well, it's not always right when I stop, but you know. So that's a struggle I experience, hair and skin. Now the colors that I'm using for the rest of this girl, her outfit and such, you will maybe recognize it. I used it in a previous card. It was actually for one of the color challenges from my favorite things, and I just really love the combo, so I searched for it on my blog again to see what combinations I used, and then I reused them here. Except for, of course, the ducklings. Those are in yellows, which I really love. I also love a yellow coat, but well, then I would have diverged from my original idea. Now also I think the yellow would perfectly work with this blue combination that I'm using all over for the rest, but I didn't choose it, but it can be used. But I really wanted to use the red combination actually, so I wasn't going to change that. So the umbrella, it started with the idea that I was going to switch in between, but then skipping one of the parts every time, I realized that it wasn't an option. As you can see on the left, the two same colors are next to each other. So I decided to use some darker colors in the underneath part of the umbrella, and then just do the same on the top one as I already did for the other two parts. but it was a bit fiddling. I first did all the same shadowing, coloring things, and I really wasn't happy because one part is on the top and the other part is the inside. So my head was like, no, it cannot be the same. Something isn't logical about the coloring. So then I darkened up the inside part that you can see. And that's what I'm doing here. So that was also a hard part because I didn't figure it out. Um, and I also like the idea of doing this in a rainbow color combination. But just with my background, I felt a bit limited. I decided to use the same color family as my background. So now onto the lovely red combination that I used also on the previous card with my favorite things. I got a lot of lovely comments about the combination, and well, a lot of people told me that they wanted to use it, and I'm so flattered. Probably this combination already existed, but I wasn't aware of it, and apparently a lot of people weren't aware of it. But I just came to this combination by trying to match with the color challenge and just taking my hex chart that I have with my Copic markers on and trying to figure out how I could recreate it. And that's how I came to this combination. But I so love it. So I'm glad I'm keeping my color combinations visible on well, YouTube, but also on my blog post so that I can easily revisit it. Also for this one, my blog post is listed down below in the description box if you want to check it out. There I have listed everything for the umbrella, the jacket or boots, skin, hair, pants, ducklings, you know. So it's really easy to find it there if you don't want to rewatch the different caps that I'm using. I just, with all the editing and stuff, there are a lot of people who create videos and also add the marker combinations extra on the screen. I'm really sorry that I'm not doing that, but it's just time consuming for me to do that, and I think that if I can already give it to you on my blog posts and show it like this with the caps on the side, that it can also already help. And this way I can make it a bit time less consuming while editing and doing the voiceover and such, and just creating more content. And I think that's handier than me putting all my time into, well, another time showing the marker combinations, you know. So I hope you get that. um, that's why I'm not doing that. I'm trying on my blog post to make it as logical as possible for you guys to see what I used where. Um, if there are images like these where I have more color combinations, that I try to divide it for all the parts. If I have only a few markers and it's clear that I have that combination and that, then I list them all together on the bottom of my blog post. So I'm trying to make it as handy as possible for you guys. So I'm using the matching dies to cut all of these cuties out, and then I am going to, well, get the lay of the land with the images that I cut out and the background that I already have, because I still need to trim it down and I don't really know yet how far. But this is sort of the idea that we've got, and as you can see here, using the yellow on the coat and the boots would also work perfectly, I think. And then there is even more of the combinations returning, which I really love, but I wanted to use the red, as I said, so not an option. I'm trimming down this panel now, making it 4.5, if I'm not wrong. I have no clue. Inches are difficult for me, so it's 14 centimeters. I'm going to use this black cardstock to put on the back of my card base, because as I said in the beginning, the panel that I heat embossed and ink blended on is slightly smaller than an A2 size. So I have those borders, and I wanted to add a color, but matching it with the background and then with the red was really hard, so I just decided on black. I used black on the outline of the images, also on the sentiment, so it's something that returns, and then it's always, well, it's a safer option in my opinion. So that's why I did it. Just adding it, wow, I cannot speak anymore. Just adding it with some adhesive roller. I prefer adding the panels on my card base like that. And then I'm going to use some foam tape to add my ink blended panel on top of my card base, just creating some dimension. I'm also going to add the images with some liquid glue and thin foam squares to, well, play a bit. Dimension is always fun. I just try to not get it too bulky for mailing, but a combination of the foam tape and thin foam squares are still okay in my opinion. So I'm going to tape close my base, and then I can add this panel. Really tricky to get it in the middle. I'm personally not really good in it, but voila. And then I'm going to lay these images again on top of my card and add them. So the girl is going to be with some liquid glue, and then the ducklings are going on top of it with some thin foam squares. So as you can see, this card is actually quite simple. I also think that you could definitely make this card even when you don't have the background stamp, and just do a lovely gradient. Make sure you have some grounding and just have some ink blending on the background. But I think with this background stamp that it truly adds something more, which I really like. I'm also super happy that the heat embossing worked out and that there wasn't a lot of excess all around this intricate stamp set. But yeah, you can definitely make it a bit more simple even, although I already like keeping it simple, and I think I did that. But no worries if you don't have a background stamp like this, you don't necessarily need to. I decided to add some glossy accents onto the umbrella, just on top of it on the blue area, so I avoided the rest. I'm just making sure that I'm filling it up completely. And then I decided to add some teardrops. These are from Little Things from Lucy's Cards. I'm just going to scatter them a bit. These are clear ones, so that you can definitely still see the background. I think that's important. And once I'm happy with placement, I'm going to add them using some liquid glue. And also, again, placing sequins or embellishments or whatever you're using, it's not easy. We all know that. And if you want to keep it simple, I personally find it even more difficult because you easily think that it's too much when you have all the rest simple and such. So play with it, make sure you check around. If you're not sure, take a picture, send it to your crafty friend, ask their opinion. I would say ask your husband, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whoever is close to you, or your sister, brother. But in my personal opinion, that doesn't help me, because mine is always saying, well, yeah, that looks nice. And I'm like, I'm not going for nice. So that's not helping. Crafty friends to the rescue always. So that's my card. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I really want to thank you all for stopping by and taking the time to watch this one. If you like it, you can always give it a thumbs up. I would truly appreciate it. I hope that you have an amazing day, and I will be back soon. Bye!